Welcome back. In the previous session, we were discussing about the morphology of flowering plants. When we have already discussed about the root and its modifications, the stem and its modifications, and also about the leaf. In this session, we will be discussing about the inflorescence and the flower. So, let's get started. As you know, the aerial part of the plant is called as the shoot. So, the shoot is made up of the stem, and in the nodes, from the nodes we get leaves. Similarly, from the stem arises the inflorescence. Flora meaning flower. So we can say that inflorescence is nothing but a modified shoot. So the shoot apical meristem, it gets modified into the flower. So, where is the shoot apical meristem present? Apical meristem. So, at the tip. So, this meristem, when it gets modified, it becomes the flower. In this case, such flowers will be solitary or single flowers, because there is only one shoot apical meristem. It will result in the production of a single flower. But in most of the cases, flowers are born laterally from the nodes also. So we can say that inflorescence is nothing but the arrangement of flowers on the floral axis. How the flowers are arranged on the floral axis, whether the inflorescence is coming from the shoot apical meristem, from the tip, or from the lateral side. Based on this, there are two types of inflorescence. The first type of inflorescence is called as racemose inflorescence, and the second type of inflorescence. These are the two most common type of inflorescence found in plants. In racemose inflorescence, the floral axis, it develops from the axils of the leaf, or it develops from the lateral meristem, from the lateral sides. So because of this, the shoot, it continues to grow. This type of inflorescence, it is of indefinite growth. From the side, from the lateral meristem, the inflorescence is developing, which means that the shoot tip is free to grow. It will keep on growing, continue to grow, whereas new inflorescence develops from the lateral sides. So it shows indefinite growth, and flowers are present in acropetalous order, meaning the new flowers are at the top, whereas the old flowers are at the bottom. So these are the new flowers. This is what is meant by acropetalous order. Acro means top. So new flowers are at the top, whereas the old flowers are at the bottom. Of course, when the stem is growing up, the flowers born in the beginning will be at the bottom, flowers newly formed will be at the top. This is what is meant by acropetalous order, and the shoot continues to grow. So there is indefinite growth. Whereas in cymose inflorescence, this develops from the shoot apical meristem, because of which the shoot has definite growth. It stops its growth. So once the shoot tip is modified into the inflorescence, the growth will stop over there. So this kind of shoot has a definite growth, and here the flowers are born in basipetalous order. In basipetalous order, the old flowers are at the top, whereas new flowers arise at the bottom. That is what is meant by basipetalous order. So these are the two general types of inflorescence seen in plants, racemose and cymose. So it is nothing but an axis which produces the flowers. So let us look at the flower. The flower, as you know, it is the reproductive part of the plant. Whereas what we have discussed till now are the vegetative parts. The root, stem and the leaf, they contribute to the vegetative parts, whereas the flower is the reproductive part of a plant. Flowers are seen in angiosperms, in gymnosperms and other lower plants. Flowers are absent. So only the angiosperms have flowers, therefore they are called as flowering plants. The flower is born on the inflorescence and it is involved in sexual reproduction. The flower. So if you look at a typical flower as represented by a hibiscus or a China rose flower, so as you can see, this is a hibiscus flower. So a flower, it has a stalk called as the pedicel. So the stalk of the flower is called as pedicel. Using this pedicel, it is attached to the inflorescence or to the stem. So that is the stalk of the flower. The stalk, it goes up and it results in a swollen portion, a basal swollen portion, as you can see. This is called as the thalamus. At the base of the thalamus, in some flowers, we can see green leaf-like structures called as bract. So hibiscus is a good example because it shows most of these features. So what we are seeing here, at the base of the thalamus, green leaf-like structures called as bracts. Flowers which have bracts are called as bracteate flowers. Flowers where bracts are absent are called as ebracteate. E means absent. So the thalamus finally will go up and it will then end up in the next floral member, that is the calyx. So this is the calyx, as you can see here. The calyx is the outermost whorl of the flower. In the flower, there are 4 whorls. Starting from the outside, we have the calyx, which is the green part. The calyx, it has got members called as sepals. The sepals, they could be free or the sepals could be fused. In this case, the sepals are fused together. So if the sepals are fused, it is called as gamosepalous condition. If the sepals are free, it is called as polysepalous condition. Poly means many, whereas in this you can see that the sepals are fused. So the calyx members are called as sepals. The calyx, it has protective function. When the flower is in the bud stage, the calyx will protect the flower bud. Next we have the second whorl, that is the corolla. So the corolla is usually colorful and it is large. The main function of corolla is to attract the insects for pollination. Some flowers also are aromatic, they smell nice in order to attract the insects. So the members of corolla are called as petals. So in the case of hibiscus, we can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals, and the sepals are also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in hibiscus there are 5 sepals and there are 5 petals. So and they are all arranged in one single whorl. So the petals can once again be free or fused. In this case, the petals are free. This condition is called as polypetalous. If the petals are fused, it is called as gamopetalous condition. So the second whorl is the petals. So in hibiscus, it is made up of 5 members. The calyx and corolla are called as the accessory parts of a flower, meaning they are not important for sexual reproduction. So that is the calyx and corolla. The calyx is represented by the alphabet K, whereas the corolla is represented by the alphabet C. So calyx and corolla are the accessory parts, whereas the third whorl is called as the androecium. The androecium, it represents the male reproductive organ. The androecium is seen or is represented by the stamens, whereas the innermost whorl, gynoecium, it is represented by the pistil, which is the female reproductive part. So calyx and corolla are accessory parts, whereas the androecium and gynoecium are the essential parts of a flower, which represent the male and female reproductive part. We will discuss about all of this in detail. This is an example for a dicot flower. In monocots, for example, lily, water lily, the calyx and corolla, they are not separate but they are fused together to produce a structure called as the perianth, which is represented by the alphabet P. So this is in the case of monocots. Calyx and corolla are fused together to produce a single layer called as the perianth. Flowers could be either unisexual or bisexual. So unisexual meaning it has either the androecium or the gynoecium. Androecium is represented by the alphabet A and gynoecium is represented by the alphabet G. So it may have only androecium or only gynoecium. For example, papaya flower, watermelon. These are examples for unisexual flower, whereas hibiscus is an excellent example for bisexual flower, where both the male, that is the androecium, and the gynoecium are present in the same flower. So it has got both androecium and gynoecium in the same flower. Such flowers are called as bisexual flowers. Example, hibiscus, rose, etc. Also, if we look at the symmetry of flower, there are two terminologies we use, that is a actinomorphic flower and a zygomorphic flower. Actinomorphic condition and zygomorphic condition. Simply they mean the two types of symmetry, radial symmetry and bilateral symmetry in simple terms. Actinomorphic condition is represented by the symbol a circle with the cross mark, whereas zygomorphic symbol is represented by two dots separated by a line. So in radial symmetry, more than one vertical plane or radial plane can divide the flower into equal halves. So there is more than one plane as represented by the symbol. It can divide the half in this plane, or in any other plane. That is radial symmetry. Whereas in a zygomorphic flower, only one vertical plane. So this is the one plane which will divide the flower into two equal halves. That is what is called as the zygomorphic flowers. And then there are irregular flowers based on the symmetry. For example, in Canna indica, no plane can divide the flower into equal halves because the symmetry is irregular. Example, Canna. Those bright red colored flowers. So it is a monocot plant, Canna. So that is about the symmetry of the flower. Another important concept we need to understand in this lesson is about estivation. So estivation is defined as the arrangement of sepals and petals in the floral bud condition with respect to other members of the same whorl. So, as you already know, the outermost whorl is the calyx. It is represented by the sepals. So, how are the sepals arranged with respect to other sepals. So in this condition there are 5 sepals. How is this sepal arranged with respect to other members? Similarly, there are 5 petals in the corolla whorl. How is each petal arranged with respect to other members of the same whorl is what is called as aestivation, the arrangement of sepals and petals with other members of the same whorl. So in general there are 4 types of aestivation that is seen in plants. The first type of aestivation is called as valvate aestivation. In valvate aestivation, the margins of the sepals or the margins of the petals, they just touch each other and there is no overlapping that is seen. Example in calotropis. So they just touch each other and overlapping is not seen. Whereas the second type of aestivation is called as twisted aestivation. An excellent example for this is the hibiscus flower. So if you see in twisted aestivation, the sepals or the petals, the margins will overlap each other in a particular direction. So if you observe in this case, this margin is overlapping the margin of this particular petal and it is on top. This is on top of another petal. This is also on top of another petal. Same is the case with these two. So there is overlapping of the petals with each other in a particular direction, that is twisted aestivation. Whereas in imbricate aestivation, overlapping is seen but not in a particular direction. So that would be imbricate aestivation. So direction is not followed. And finally, we have the fourth type of aestivation seen in members of Fabaceae or Leguminosae. Fabaceae family, that is in pea, and in the bean plant called as vexillary aestivation. In vexillary aestivation, as represented by pea flower, there is one large petal which is called as a standard petal. So there is one petal. This large petal, it will cover 2 small petals called as the wing petals. So 2. And these 2 wing petals will in turn, they cover the innermost 2 petals called as the keel petal. And the keel petals are there once again, they are fused. So this condition is called as the 1 plus 2 plus 2 condition, and the aestivation is called as vexillary aestivation or papilionaceous aestivation as represented by pea or bean plant. Having discussed aestivation, let us move on to the androecium and the gynoecium and let us study them briefly. The third whorl of the flower is called as the androecium. As you know, the androecium, it is represented by the stamen, which is the male reproductive organ of a flower. The androecium is represented by the alphabet A. It is the third whorl of the flower seen inside the petals. The stamen, it consists of a long stalk-like structure called as the filament. At the anterior end, at the tip of the filament, we find what is called as the anther. The anthers in general, they are bilobed structure. So the anther is bilobed. It is made up of two lobes, and in each lobe there are two sac-like structures called as the pollen sacs. So the anther is bilobed, and in each lobe there are two sacs called as pollen sacs. Inside the pollen sacs, the pollen grains are produced which carry the male gamete. So the anthers produce the pollen grains. There are some stamens which are sterile. Stamens which are sterile are called as staminode, meaning they do not produce pollen grains, or the pollen grains are not functional. Such stamens are called as staminode. Where is the stamen present in a flower? The stamen, it may be present united or fused either with the petal, or it could be present on the perianth, or in the case of hibiscus it could be present on the style. So in this condition it is called as epipetalous. Whereas if the stamen is present on the perianth, it is called as epiphyllous condition, and if it is attached to the style, as you can see in the hibiscus, this is the style to which the stamens are attached, then we call it as the epistylous condition. So the length of the filament, it's different in different flower, or within the same flower, as seen in the example of salvia and also mustard. The length of the filament may change. So that is how the stamens are attached or present in the flower, maybe on the petal, epipetalous, on the perianth, epiphyllous, or attached to the style. Also, the stamens may appear in one group, all the stamens together in one group, then such condition is called as monadelphous condition. Example, we see it in hibiscus. So all the stamens are present in one single group, that is monadelphous condition. If they are present in two groups, maybe one group here and one group on another location, such condition is called as diadelphous condition, is seen in the pea plant. And if there are stamens are present in many groups, more than two groups, then such condition is called as polyadelphous condition, which is exhibited in the citrus family, that is lemon, orange, etc. We find the polyadelphous condition. Poly means many. So the stamens are present in many groups. That is all about the androecium, which is represented by the stamen. Let us move on to the innermost whorl, that is the gynoecium. The gynoecium is represented by the alphabet G. It forms the fourth whorl, or the innermost whorl of a flower. It is represented by the pistil or carpel, which is the female reproductive part of the flower. The pistil is represented in general by three parts. The basal swollen portion of the gynoecium is called as the ovary. The ovary then proceeds up and it forms a narrow, long, tube-like structure called as the style, and at the tip of the style we have the stigma. The stigma, it acts as a receptive surface for the pollen grains. So the pollen grains will come and land on the stigma. The style, it connects, it's a tube-like structure, it connects the stigma to the ovary, and it also plays an important role in carrying the male gametes, as you have already seen. So the pollen grain will germinate, it will produce a pollen tube, the pollen tube will grow through the style to the ovary. The ovary, in some plants there is only one ovary or one pistil, that is what is called as a monocarpellary condition. So there is only one ovary or one pistil, whereas if there is more than one carpel, then the carpels, more than one carpel, then the carpels could be either free or it could be fused. If it is free, it is called as the apocarpous condition. If the carpels are fused, it is called as the syncarpous condition. Apocarpous condition example is rose. Syncarpous condition example could be tomato. So if there is a single carpel, monocarpellary. If it is more than one carpel, it is called as multicarpellary. They could be free or they could be fused. The ovary, it contains inside it a tissue called as the placenta, and attached to the placenta we find the ovules. So ovules are present inside the ovary. The ovary, after fertilization, it turns into the fruit, whereas the ovule, it becomes the seed. The arrangement of ovule, which is attached to the placental tissue inside the ovary, there are different types of arrangement. That is what is called as placentation. Placentation is the arrangement of ovules inside the ovary. How are they arranged? So there are 5 types of placentation. We have the marginal placentation. Then we have axial placentation, parietal placentation. The 4th type of placentation is free central, and the 5th placentation is called as basal placentation. So how are the ovules attach it to the placenta inside the ovary is what is called as placentation. In the case of marginal placentation, example P, the placenta, it forms a ridge and the ovules are developed on either side of the ridge in rows. So when you open a pea pod, you can see that the inside the ovules are attached to the ridge in rows. That is marginal placentation. In axial placentation, example tomato, hibiscus, lemon, etc. The placenta, it takes up the axial position. In parietal placentation, the ovules, they arise from the innermost layer of the ovary or from the periphery of the ovary and thus generating a false septum. Example mustard. Actually, there is only one chamber or locule, but because of the presence of a false septum, it appears to be bilocular. What is a locule? A locule is nothing but the chamber inside the ovary. So, these chambers are called as locules. Because of false septum, it appears to be bilocular. Example, mustard. In free central placentation, as seen in the example of argemone, the septum is absent. So, septum is absent and such type of placentation is called as free central placentation. The placenta is present as a central axis. And finally, basal placentation as seen mostly in monocots. Example, sunflower, there is only one single ovule. Only one ovule which is present at the base of the ovary. Such placentation is called as basal placentation. That is all about the gynoecium, which is represented by the pistil. It contains the stigma, style and ovary. Ovary, it contains many chambers which contain the placenta tissue. Attached to the placenta, we have the ovules. The attachment of ovules to the placenta inside the ovary is called as placentation. There are 5 types of placentation. Finally, based on the position of the gynoecium with respect to other whorls such as calyx, corolla and androecium, flowers can be classified into 3 types. Number 1, hypogynous flower. Hypo means below, gynous represents gynoecium. So, in this type of flower, the calyx, corolla and the androecium are present below the gynoecium. Hence, the gynoecium, it occupies the topmost position. Example in hibiscus. Such flowers are called as hypogynous. Gynoecium is at the top, all other whorls are below the gynoecium. So, in this case, the ovary is said to be a superior ovary because it is present above all others. The second type of flower is called as perigynous flower. In perigynous condition, the gynoecium is at the center and other parts such as calyx, corolla and androecium, they develop on the rim of the thalamus. So, the thalamus and the gynoecium, they are almost on the same level and the ovary is said to be half inferior. example in rose. So here the gynoecium is at the center, thalamus is also on the same level. So it is neither superior nor inferior, it is half inferior. Finally, the third type of flower is called as epigynous flower, which is opposite to hypogynous. Here, all the other whorls such as Calyx Corolla and Androecium are present epi, above the gynoecium, and gynoecium is present below. So what happens is here the thalamus, it will grow and it will cover the gynoecium. So other parts such as Calyx Corolla and Androecium, they are present above the gynoecium. Hence the ovary in this condition is said to be a inferior ovary. So gynoecium is at the bottom and other parts are at the top. Example is guava. So this classification is with respect to the position of the gynoecium with respect to other whorls of the flower. Next we will discuss about the fruit and the seed. The ovary in the future will become the fruit and the ovule will develop into the seed.